Hey, welcome to Stuff to Blow Your Mind Trailer Talk. My name is Robert Lamb.
And I'm Christian Sager.
And I'm Joe McCormick, and we are the hosts of the Stuff to Blow Your Mind podcast, a science podcast in the How Stuff Works family. And this is not itself the Stuff to Blow Your Mind podcast. We're getting a little feedback there.
It's just his phone.
We are the hosts of the Stuff to Blow Your Mind podcast, but this is not the podcast itself. This is Trailer Talk, where we come on here, talk about some movies related to episodes that have come out in the past week or so. And so last week, Robert and I did an episode about artificial gravity and how you can simulate gravity in space stations and spacecraft. And so today we thought we'd look at some artificial gravity movies.
That's right. The episode is titled Artificial Gravity, Cosmic Wheels and Hurtling Towers. I guess we talk a little bit about actual human colons in that episode.
Nice.
We do, because here's a question for you guys. Do you really like the idea of pooping into a vacuum cleaner?
Yes. Yes. I've tried it, but only on Earth.
Yeah. Well, then maybe artificial gravity isn't for you. But
okay.
Here's another thing. Do you like the idea of your bones becoming brittle and hollow over
Yes.
time?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the
Tough
thing
sell.
I'm looking forward to the most.
And you like
about
the
getting
idea
older.
of your muscles becoming so weak it hurts to stand.
Or wear clothes when you return to Earth.
Yeah. How about, do you like the idea of your eyes getting slightly deformed in their shape so that it's difficult to see and they hurt and there's
I want to look
weird...
like that puppet of Arnold Schwarzenegger in Total Recall, like midway before like he blows up from the pressure on Mars.
Here's another one. Do you like the idea of your whole body above your heart just kind of swelling constantly?
Yes. Oh, there it is. I just said that out of the blue. I didn't know that you guys had this preloaded.
That's, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger on the surface of Mars, bugging a little bit.
Yeah.
Another detail of life in microgravity that I love is the idea that you're sleeping. And first of all, you might need to strap your arms down so they don't just float into your face and ghost fondle you in the night. But then also, you're potentially like sleeping in a bubble of your own respiratory excrement because you're just breathing out, and that it's not like you have a lot of air circulation going on there in every case. So it's just kind of clinging to you.
Everything you're saying
man.
sounds better than summer in Atlanta to me.
I know how to get you, though, Christian.
Okay.
What if you couldn't eat food that generated crumbs because they'd get everywhere? So you can only eat things out of a bag or that are fairly solid.
That's a deal breaker for me because I'm a crumb guy. Like before we came in here, I
like
literally
your-
was just
your
you
cookies.
guys saw me. I was
Yeah.
shoving chips into my mouth, and I had crumbs all over my shirt, and was just like, oh, I got to get them off before
We
we
usually
go live.
just put a live rat on you
yeah,
before we go
yeah,
on.
that's
so
how
you
I
can eat
usually
all the
take care of
crumbs.
it. Yeah, rats.
I love crumbs, too. Yeah, so there are so many ways that the human body is just not designed to live in space. Not just the body, but our culture and our day-to-day activities are just ruined by a zero-G or microgravity environment.
Yeah,
where
we're creatures of gravity.
Yeah. We totally evolved in gravity environments. It's not good for our bodies. It's a damage to our health over the long term, but it's also just, it gets in the way of us doing the things we want to do with our lives. So there's more
Like fly.
than... Well...
You never wanted to fly?
No,
Get rid of gravity?
No, I'm talking about
You need gravity to
lack
fly,
of
though.
gravity.
It's true. I
Yeah.
know. I'm
That's
playing
true.
devil's advocate.
Yeah, without gravity, I guess you can't fly. You just sort of fall.
Yeah, that's basically what's going on when you're looking at footage of astronauts in microgravity or zero gravity. They are in free fall within a container.
Anyway, so in our episode, we discussed several ways that you could, in fact, generate simulated artificial gravity in space. One way would be this method we talk about called linear acceleration, where because acceleration and gravity are equivalent as you experience them, if you're constantly going faster and faster in the same direction without slowing down or changing or allowing your acceleration rate to slow down, you will feel gravity toward the back of the spaceship. And so you could build sort of like a tower going through space.
Right, and as we mentioned on the podcast, this is almost never used in science fiction, or at least in science fiction films, except in The Expanse.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. The Expanse, which we've done an episode of the podcast on before. Also, this is actually a nice place for me to segue. Guys, where can people listen to this episode that you recorded?
Oh, just about anywhere. Apple Podcasts is a great choice.
Right? Spotify also works. You can
Yes.
listen to it on Google Play or anywhere you get your podcasts.
Or you can go to stufftoblowyourmind.com, and wherever you go, don't just download the episode, hit subscribe so we keep coming at you and you get to see all the cool stuff we do in the future.
Yeah, we do 2 episodes a week. Tuesdays and Thursdays, we are just constantly throwing weird science in your direction. And then we do this show as well. And this is more like our party time. This is where we take the research and we have fun with it in relation to some of our favorite movies.
Now, we should probably ask you out there, because we have our friend Nathan here who will be writing down any comments you leave under this video. So if you have a comment, you want to talk about your favorite artificial gravity scene in a sci-fi movie, or you want to ask us a question about artificial gravity or about the movies we're talking about, whatever it is, you can hit down the comment section and leave your thoughts. Nathan will write it on a board or maybe tell us what it is. I don't know what he's going to do. We'll find out one way or another.
Now, one thing I want to stress here is that the trailers we're looking at here, the movies we're looking at today, this was the main criteria. We wanted to avoid just magic gravity, magic artificial gravity, where someone just flips a switch and all the floors are like Earth floors.
Because that'd be every sci-fi movie ever.
And it's not just like crappy sci-fi, even great sci-fi. Like Dune has magic gravity. Star Trek has magic gravity.
The Holtzman field, right? Yeah.
So we decided to focus on either films that do it really well, such as 2001 that we're going to discuss, and in a few cases, or at least one major case, a situation where they kind of they kind of tried to get the gravity right, at least for a little while, and then they said, screw it, just make it magic. But we'll get to that example in a bit.
So I guess we're about ready to look at our first trailer, right? But before we do, we should just remind you to hit the comments down there if you have anything to add. And
yeah, also, if you're watching this after we've recorded it live, we will still be checking out the comments for a couple days after this airs. So please, still leave comments if this is in the future and you're not actually with us right now as we're saying these words.
Hopefully we're with you in the future. But
yep. You never know. We might be right behind you right now.
Maybe we should start with the best example from movies. This is probably the best example as far as I know, and is very well known. This is going to be Stanley Kubrick's 1968 film, 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh. Yes.
This is a great movie.
This is a great movie. This is one of my favorite films, and it just sets the gold standard. Like, there are just so few films that achieve this level of quality in general. Like, not even just talking about science fiction or space films. Like, this is just a film that is just beautiful to behold.
Well, isn't it because Stanley Kubrick faked the moon landing, and so he had all of this extra money to put this out?
Christian, don't... We've got people on our Facebook who believe that. Don't perpetuate
what I heard...
He didn't fake...
I saw Room 237. I'm pretty sure he did.
I heard that he faked the moon landing, and so, as an apology... he actually went into space to film all of 2001.
Right, yeah, exactly. It's all done in space. Yeah. Sorry. Okay, go ahead. But I was being sarcastic the whole time there, if you couldn't tell.
So there are a couple of scenes in this movie that show space stations and spacecraft generating artificial gravity. One of them is it called the Space Station 5 or Saturn 5?
Yes.
Where the space station is a giant wheel. It's supposed to be about 300 meters in diameter. And this generates artificial gravity through the centrifugal force method, which is something that we explore at length in our podcast episode. And the idea there is that because we talked about acceleration can simulate the force of gravity, acceleration doesn't just have to mean going faster, it can also mean a change in direction. And if you're moving in a rotating pattern, you're always constantly changing direction, meaning there's constantly an acceleration force that you experience toward the center of the hub of rotation. So if you're in a wheel, the floor is going to be pushing up against your feet, and it will feel like gravity to you because your inertia wants you to fly off into space in a straight line. Now, so this can generate space stations, spacecraft with some degree of artificial gravity. There are a lot of complications with it, like we talk about in the episode. It might make you sick, depending on how big it is.
You can't throw the football around as easily.
Right. I'd throw a football at Robert, and it would just curve off to the side in a way that would be very bizarre. It would seem like living in a haunted house.
Yes.
Unless it's a very, very big station with a very slow rotation speed. But anyway, so the other thing that they have in the movie is this spacecraft, right? And there's this iconic scene where the astronaut Frank Poole is jogging laps inside this rotating room, right?
And boxing as well, as we're seeing here.
This is...
He's practicing his fighting skills just in case.
You've all seen the design for the spaceship. It has like the big round spherical chamber at the front of the ship, and that's where this is going on. So,
guys, I have to admit here, I love this movie, but I actually don't know how they did the practical effects on this. Do you guys have notes on that?
I do. So one of our sources for the episode on artificial gravity was this book called Artificial Gravity by Gilles Clement, Angie Buckley and William Pulaski, and they have an article within this book about the history of artificial gravity, and some of it's about the science fiction, like 2001, and how they filmed it. And so what actually happened here, so the room is supposed to be a wheel, or actually it's a sphere, with 11 meters of diameter.
Okay.
And it'll generate about, they say, the moon's gravity on the outside. So it's not like jogging on Earth. It'd be like jogging on the moon. It's easy jogging, you know, uphill all the way, or downhill all the way, pretty much.
This cuts into a point that we make in the podcast, and that is that there are basically two approaches to artificial gravity, two ways of thinking about it. Are you trying to replicate human gravity so you don't realize you're in space?
Right.
Or are you just trying to mitigate the ill effects of microgravity on the human body?
Right. Do you want to fully simulate an Earth environment that's indistinguishable from Earth so that any tourist could go up there and feel totally comfortable? Or is it just enough to have a place where you can get some exercise and not have your body deteriorate?
So when we talk about ideas of less than Earth gravity aboard a ship or a space station, it's not like, oh, well, you almost got there, but you didn't quite pull it off. No, you could conceivably still accomplish a lot by just achieving a certain amount of gravity.
Right. So back to the question, how did they do the spinning room in 2001? So the way they did this is he said, okay, I'm going to spend $750,000 to build an enclosed shell Ferris wheel with the set inside it. So what he did
Sounds
was
about right for Kubrick.
Yeah, Kubrick built this vertical wheel, this like a Ferris wheel, rotating vertically around a hub, and that was the set for the room. So when you see the actor jogging, the actor is always at the bottom of this enclosed Ferris wheel, and the room is rotating around the actor. So the stand-in for artificial gravity in the room is real gravity, because the actor is always at the bottom. And this actually demonstrates something interesting about artificial gravity itself, which is that artificial gravity depends on the concept of reference frames. Like if you are in an enclosed reference frame, movement can feel like stillness. The same way, we're moving very fast around the hub of the rotation of the Earth and around the sun, but it doesn't feel like movement to us because we've got this inertial reference frame. It just feels like being still. Same thing can be true in a rotating environment in space, and the same thing can be demonstrated when you make it look like an actor is jogging around the outside of a room just by having the camera within this environment.
Ramsey's thrown up an image here.
So was the camera operator also moving within that space, or did they have like a a cutout?
I think they had a camera on a dolly track. So there's more than one shot. There's one version of the scene where Frank Poole is jogging around the room and the camera's following him. And in that way the room appears to be rotating.
Sure.
But there's another one where the camera is stationary in the room and it just looks like Poole is jogging around the room.
Right. And this is before the invention of the Steadicam, which was actually invented for another Kubrick movie, The Shining.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Anyway, I just thought that was really cool. They managed to do that, and it only cost $750,000.
Worth every penny. Worth every penny.
Hey, we're still celebrating it to this day.
Now, another film that we are still celebrating to this day.
Wait, before we go on, should we just remind them, if you've just tuned in recently, we are the hosts of the Stuff to Blow Your Mind podcast, a science podcast in the How Stuff Works family. This is not the Stuff to Blow Your Mind podcast. This is Trailer Talk, where we come on here on social media and talk about some movies related to our podcast episodes.
This is like the footnotes to the podcast.
Yeah,
sure.
It keeps us from spending an extra half hour on each episode talking about weird movie tie-ins.
Yeah.
Hey, do we have any questions? Not yet?
Not yet.
Why can't they find your podcast on iTunes anymore?
Oh, that is a worrisome question. Somebody just asked why they can't find our podcast on iTunes anymore. Instead of Apple Podcasts. Yeah, so I think that now I'm not an expert on this because I don't own an iPhone, but I believe that it's all been rebranded and that the Apple Podcasts app on your phone is what you want to be using now instead of iTunes.
Yes, I believe that's right.
Sure.
All right.
But
try that. But if that doesn't work, go to stufftoblowyourmind.com and you can just download them directly.
Yes.
So I can't remember what I was in the middle of saying. Probably nothing important.
I think you were about to set up we're going from one of the greatest sci-fi, if not the greatest sci-fi films ever made, to the greatest James Bond film ever made.
Yeah,
This is probably the worst James Bond movie in the history of James Bond, but it's also
this is
one
where
of the
Robert
most
and
fun
my
to
age
watch
is,
now.
is showing.
I think it comes down to what you want out of Bond. Because I remember being a kid.
This is
and
maybe the
enjoying
silliest
it. Yes,
Bond.
this is the silliest Bond. And I remember being a kid and enjoying it, but pretty early on also turning against it and saying, this is too silly for a Bond film. I want spies and Soviets and believable yet fantastic gadgets.
Yeah.
Now I'm at the age where if you said you need to go watch a Bond film tonight, this is the only one I would watch.
This is the only one where a pigeon does a double take.
Do you know that they're actually talking about taking Fast and the Furious as a franchise into the same direction as Moonraker?
In space?
They're
In
gonna.
space.
They're
They should.
theoretically going to do a Fast and Furious in space.
All film franchises
Yeah.
should go into space.
So it looks
I
like
agree.
what happened with Moonraker is what? Star Wars came out and the producers were like, everybody's going to space now. We got to stay hip.
Yeah.
We got to take Roger Moore into orbit and have him have laser battles, which is what happens in this movie.
Well, I couldn't find any details on this, but I suspect what's going on with Moonraker is that it's one of these where you have way too many cooks. And some of the cooks, some of the individuals involved in the production, clearly said, "Yeah, Star Wars is big. Let's go in the space direction with Moonraker. I don't care what you have to do." And then there also seems to have been an element that said, "Whoa, well, let's make it believable. Let's keep it realistic." For instance, you see space shuttles in this.
Yeah.
This was actually before space shuttles were in service yet.
Right.
They were just the design was out, and that's what they took and ran with here.
It looks like one of those movies where they actually did connect with expert consultants and then used some of their ideas and ignored most of what they said.
Right, and the space station, Hugo Drax's space station, is a prime example of this because I'd forgotten this entirely. And then I was doing research for this trailer talk, and I realized, yes, this space station has artificial gravity and it spins. Those two facts line up. But then you start looking at how it ends up coming to play in the show.
I love that part with all the guys floating.
So many zero-G wires used in this film. But so
Just fighting in space, free space.
So the space station spins around, and instead of generating artificial gravity along the inside edges, as it should, it generates top-down artificial
That's
gravity.
what it looks like. Now, maybe it's just that the editing is confusing, but
Maybe.
I thought the same thing. I looked at it, and what it looks like to me is it's suggesting that the roof is here and the floor is here, and it's spinning around like this. So what that should do, if it were actually obeying the physics, is everybody gets flung to the outside wall of the room.
Yeah.
So, all right. Two things that I don't, again, because I wasn't on this episode, I don't have a lot to add on the science, but there is a podcast that I recommend that isn't ours, and it's called James Bonding, in which Matt Gorley and Matt Myra go through and watch every single film and add production notes.
Oh.
So if we want to find out more about Moonraker, maybe we should go check out
Maybe
their
they have the
Moonraker
answer.
episode. Yeah, and then my second question is for the audience and for you guys. Joe says this is the worst Bond movie ever. What's your favorite Bond movie?
Now, this is not the same as saying this is the one I would be least desiring to watch. I would put Moonraker near the top of my list to watch, but it is just objectively a terrible film.
Oh, yeah. So we were talking about, why does the gravity not work? Is it an editing problem? Is it scientific consultants getting overruled? Whatever the reason, it's a mess. I'm certainly not denying that this movie is a mess, but it is such an enjoyable mess.
It's got Michael Lonsdale in it as the villain Hugo Drax, and Michael Lonsdale is I just love Michael Lonsdale. He's so dry in the movie. Robert, you do a Michael Lonsdale impression, don't you?
Sorry, let me read a quote from this film.
These are great.
Allow me to introduce you to the airlock chamber. Observe, Mr. Bond, your rope from this world to the next. And that's the same level of energy Michael Lonsdale always uses. Whether he's in The Day of the Jackal, The Name of the Rose, where he plays the wonderful understated Abbott in that movie.
Now, this movie also has Jaws coming back in it. Jaws, the Bond villain with metal teeth who bites people in the neck to kill them.
I love me some Jaws.
He first showed up. Sorry?
And metal cables.
He bites through a metal cable in this movie. So Jaws first showed up in the movie before this, The Spy Who Loved Me, with Barbara Bach. Is that her name? Another Roger
Been a
Moore
while
movie.
since I saw that one.
But anyway, he comes back in this one because he was a very popular character. And in this movie, it's great because he has a love sequence.
There they are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jaws falls in love with the girl with braces.
I remember liking Jaws when I was a little kid, like not thinking he was a villain, like
Well, he is
wanting
constantly
things to
killing
turn out
people.
well. For
Right.
him.
Well, they embrace him more in this. I feel like he was kind of comic in the previous one as well, but clearly this movie loves him. And
Yeah.
Now, I
decides he
believe
needs to be
the
happy.
idea behind David Bautista showing up in Spectre is that he may become the new Jaws. So,
What?
yeah, there's some, theoretically, he might be the new Jaws, like he might come back with
Oh
a metal
man, I hope
teeth.
he has metal teeth.
Anthony asks, is there an understood limited level of gravity that will prevent deterioration and sickness? That is an excellent question. We don't know with precision, especially over the long term, but there have been some experiments on this. And generally, like for example, there have been experiments in parabolic flights that simulate reduced levels of gravity.
Okay.
And one thing I recall from the episode, now I'm afraid I'm going to get the numbers a little bit off, but I think this is about right, that once you're at about 0.2 G, about 20% of Earth gravity, people started to be able to do their thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then once you get to about 0.5 G, people perceived this as enough gravity to live in. So that's just about human perception in the moment.
So somewhere between
think-
those two is a good area.
Right. Yeah, once you get to that, you're hitting in the strike zone. But also, I would say that we don't have long-term studies. So
Right.
we don't know how it's going to affect people over months and years living in reduced gravity environments.
And some of these plans that we look at in the podcast episode, are actual proposals that call for the use of limited artificial gravity, such as like essentially you get into a pod and it jerks you back and forth for a certain amount of time. It would be kind of like an exercise machine.
The turbolator.
Yeah, the turbolator. or is that what it was called?
No, that was
Something
our
like
nickname
that.
for it.
Yeah, but the idea would be, all right, if you can't have artificial gravity all the time to mitigate these effects, then perhaps you spend an hour a day in a machine that just, shakes you up like a cocktail shaker.
So if you're just joining us and you're wondering why we're talking about shaking you up like a cocktail shaker and Moonraker at the same time, that's because we're the Stuff to Blow Your Mind podcast. This is an episode of our Facebook Live series Trailer Talk, and we are today connecting movie trailers to our recent episode on artificial gravity that Joe and Robert did.
Shaken, not stirred, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, very nice. I like that.
Do we have anything else on Moonraker here we want to share?
Nathan, do we have any other questions or comments?
Anthony added, couldn't the Moonraker gravity issue be solved by the space station rotating in more than one direction?
Anthony asks, could the Moonraker gravity issue be solved by the space station rotating in more than one direction? I don't think you'd want it rotating in more than one direction because that would just,
that kind of sums up the whole Moonraker experience, though. You feel like you're really moving in multiple directions at once.
you could make it like a coin flipping over on itself, but that would sort of defeat the purpose of the shape. You might just... the point is that
I can't
if
get
you're
enough of this
rotating,
pigeon, I'm
if
sorry.
you're rotating, you want... Is the pigeon doing a double take?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Ramsey's got a GIF up on the screen.
If you're creating an artificial gravity environment that rotates, you want the floor to be on the outside.
Yeah, well, if you look at the design, and you can do this on your own time, this homework, Trailer Talk homework, you can look up designs, and I think there's even a cutaway of the space station. And there are spherical elements to it, and if those elements had rotation going on inside them, like that would work. But what we see in the movie are outside rockets cutting on and causing
sort of
the
like-
whole station to spin.
Okay, so sort of like a gyroscope, it sounds like what you're talking
Yeah.
about. Okay. All right, we got another movie to go on to here. Remember, everybody out there, I want to hear what your favorite Bond movie is.
All
Or
right.
your least favorite.
Or your least favorite. Mine would be Spectre.
Our producer Ramsey says, Man with the Golden Gun. That is an awful one, but also one of the more fun ones to watch because it's got Christopher Lee.
Yeah, and I've gotten to the point in my life where I think the Roger Moore ones are my favorite. I used to be a Connery purist, and then I was a Lazenby fan.
I'm a Lazenby fan.
contrary
I love Her Majesty's
filmmaker.
Secret Service, but I think my favorite... It's crossed both of the Casino Royales. The Terry Southern Casino Royale and the newer Casino Royale are both great.
All right, well, the next movie we're going to look at, we're going to go back in time. We're going to go pre-2001 to 1955 in a film that I think a lot of people may not have heard of, Conquest of Space.
Tell us about it, Robert.
Okay.
Yeah.
This was a George Powell production. George Powell, you might remember from War of the Worlds and The Time Machine. So this is a real mover and shaker in some of our earlier big tent sci-fi.
He's done Martians
properties.
and he's done Morlocks.
Yeah, he's seen fire and he's seen rain. So the plot here centers around humanity's first man flight to Mars, departing from a great space station that we see here, I believe, known as the Wheel.
Nice. They have like little zip lines.
Yeah, and so the film itself, I want to get out there, is pretty terrible. I watched part of it. Other reviews we were looking at seem to indicate that it's pretty boring. But the effects are a wonderful mix of awesome and kind of crappy. Mm-hmm. But at the heart of it, they were really attempting to use like the best science and futurist views of the time. They're basing it on the work of Wernher von Braun, many of his ideas, and the imagery that was created to go along with Wernher von Braun's ideas.
Yeah, I think it was actually based on a non-fiction book.
Yes, it was.
Book, right?
It was based on a book by the same title, Conquest of Space.
I have this impression from some of the episodes we've done that Wernher von Braun was super cool. Like, do you remember in the Jack Parsons episode we learned that those guys, like, exchanged letters? Like, he just seemed like this friendly guy who was up for anything. He would talk to Jack Parsons. I believe there's a story that Wernher von Braun and Thomas Pynchon talked when Thomas Pynchon was working on Gravity's Rainbow.
I don't want to slander him because I don't remember for sure, but I do think that there's a serious amount of debate about to what extent Wernher von Braun was a Nazi when he was in Germany.
Look, outside of Nazism, I'm just saying, was he a friendly gentleman?
Well, post-war, I will say that I grew up in Fayetteville, Tennessee, which is really close to Huntsville, Alabama, where Wernher von Braun lived the later portion of his life. And there were a lot of, like, sort of folksy tales of running into him and about him being, just this nice old German guy. So, I don't know.
He didn't have any of that hidden Nazi gold.
I suppose not. But, I mean, he did have gold in the form of his scientific concepts and his contributions to the rocket program.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So I think what's important to point out about this movie that you presented to us is that this is before 2001.
Yes.
This is before Star Trek. This is really like setting the stage for like sci-fi sort of realism, right? Like hard sci-fi in a way.
Yeah, like this one, this one certainly took its science seriously, maybe too seriously, and it forgot to have much fun. Like the characters end up getting stuck on Mars, and then they can't just fly back to Mars. They have to wait a year for the distance to become optimal again. So it's details like that I think make this film special. But I think you were pointing out that Joe Dante had a major criticism about this movie.
Oh, it has no monsters.
Yeah, like if you're going to go for all this, fine, make it fun too. Throw in a monster, and we can all leave the theater feeling like we learned something and we got to see a monster.
So do they conquer space? Spoilers?
Arguably, yes. But I mean, in a way, they've already conquered space. Just look at that space station.
Yeah,
Look at that ship.
Man, I'm thinking like we have so many space episodes of the podcast that are in relation to this. Like, if you are watching this and you're really into this and you haven't heard our podcast before, certainly go start with that artificial gravity episode. But we've got that episode that's about the case against space, which is a fun one, and then we also have the episode about the rods from God.
Yep.
The idea, which was brought up by a science fiction author, of dropping metal poles on Earth.
We also have the Expanse episode, Interplanetary War, which gets into the possibility of interplanetary war and the challenges of interplanetary channel.
This is a great comment.
We have a comment coming in from Anthony who says, best Bond film question, it's a toss-up between Live and Let Die and GoldenEye because of Nintendo 64.
Oh, Anthony, I'm right there with you. I spent way too much time playing GoldenEye, and
many people of our generation.
Oh man, I probably lost like a year of creative time to that game.
I Live and Let Die. I have fond memories of watching it on TBS. I haven't seen it in a long time, so I'm not sure how I should feel about it, like culturally at this point. But I remember it being a lot of fun, and of course, it has one of the best theme songs.
Yeah.
Which is really like 3 songs crammed into one.
So what's our next film here? Is it a more recent film?
In a way, it feels like it should be more recent, but it's, 17 years old now.
Oh, are we talking about this now?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, now I'm remembering what's next.
So, you know how sometimes the movie gods just align to produce a a sudden spray of films on the same subject in the same year.
Yeah,
so
like
in
Deep Impact and
Armageddon.
Armageddon.
Both
yeah.
came out in 1998, asteroid movie year. Back in 1989, you had all the underwater movies. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
The
The
Abyss,
Abyss.
Leviathan's
Leviathan's amazing.
Deep Star 6
Yep.
that has that great explosive decompression scene
Yeah.
with Miguel Ferrer, I think. And then like
Rest in peace.
even the lower budget ones like Lords of the Deep, all 1989.
Yeah.
And then in 97, you remember the Volcano movies? Volcano with Tommy Lee Jones, Dante's Peak with Pierce Brosnan
Oh.
and Linda Hamilton.
Oh.
They just line up. So those are previous years. In the year 2000, we got Mars movies.
Yep.
Yes. And
So we got two big ones, right?
yes. So there were. Let's see. There was
Red Planet.
Red Planet. Now, the Red
Val
Planet
Kilmer.
had Val Kilmer.
I think
And a
between
killer
the three
robot.
of us, we've agreed Red Planet was the one we all went to see, and this was the one.
No.
No?
No.
You saw this instead?
I didn't see either one at the time. I watched Mission to Mars within the last couple years. Can you believe that?
Yeah, I did not watch it when it came out. I visited it later.
Now, is this the year that they ruined Mars as a title in major motion pictures for years to come?
It could be, yeah, because
Okay.
both these
Wait,
films were flops, I think.
When
Yeah.
did Ghosts of Mars come
that was
out?
years later.
Okay.
That was John Carpenter.
Yeah.
I'd say Ghosts of Mars is better than these two movies.
But Ghosts of Mars was
As
supposed
bad
to
as it
be.
is.
It was supposed to be Escape from Mars, right? Wasn't the idea that it was originally going to be
Yeah.
a
It's
Snake
it's supposed to be,
Plissken movie?
yeah, Escape from New York on Mars.
Yeah.
God, Ghosts of Mars is a terrible movie. Do you remember the main character's name in that is Desolation Williams?
Oh, yeah, played by Ice Cube, right?
Yeah, and everybody calls him Desolation. So it'll be like, hey, Desolation, can you hand me that gun?
So what about this movie? Because all I
Well-
remember about this movie is Tim Robbins dies and his like faceplate breaks in space
Yeah.
and he's frozen to death, right?
Yeah, he freezes out during a spacewalk in orbit around Mars. Now, both Red Planet and Mission to Mars, I think, have spacecraft with rotating centrifuges to create artificial gravity. You get to see more of the rotating centrifuge in Mission to Mars. I'm not sure
Okay.
if the science really works out about how big it is, if it's big enough to actually generate the kind of gravity they show in the movie. But anyway, they do take that method, and they're not employing like fake magic gravity where it's just like, oh, we can walk on the floor for some reason.
Okay.
But the end, do y'all remember the end of Mission to Mars?
They go down to the planet. There's some cavern, something. They go inside of it, and there's a big revelation, and then the
I
credits happen.
think they go inside some pyramid, which I think is either near or is the face on Mars.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
right.
And once they go inside it, there is this. The way I would describe it is a screensaver alien. So it's an alien that looks
So it's like Clippy?
If it's an alien that looks like if you move the mouse, it would disappear, and suddenly
Yeah.
you'd be back on your Windows home screen.
Okay.
Or it also. I haven't seen this one all the way through, so I never got to the alien reveal.
Yeah.
But it looks like something that would show up in what was the direct to video release? Mind's Eye, was that it? Where they had all sorts of at the time amazing computer generated art.
I don't know what you're talking
I
about.
don't know, yeah.
Is this like an early '90s thing, or?
Or late '90s thing maybe.
Okay.
But it was like I remember it being at the video store and you could rent it. It was like, oh wow, this is gonna be amazing. It was like Lawnmower Man.
Yeah, I was just about to say Lawnmower
I
Man.
think this is another example of something we talk about fairly often, which is it's astonishing to look back at the CGI of the 90s and how cool people thought it looked then and how unbelievably terrible it looks now. What
Well-
kind of spell were we under in the 90s where we just saw CGI and we're like, looks spectacular, it's dazzling special effects?
There was a broad gamut, though. I mean, like, you look at stuff like Jurassic Park, and that can still hold
Oh,
up.
yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah, totally.
And then
But-
there were people who were trying to ape that, and they just didn't have the resources.
like,
that
I
Spielberg
remember
had.
when the movie Mortal Kombat came out.
Saw it in the theater.
The marketing was bragging about the CGI reptile. Like, this is going to blow your mind. It's so good. And if you look back on it now, I dare you to watch the reptile scenes in that movie without laughing.
That's a great movie. It also has our friend Christopher Lambert in it
Oh yeah, he played Raiden.
as Raiden.
Good old
Yeah.
Christoph.
All right, are we done with Mission to Mars?
Sure, we should, I guess, remind them one more time.
Yeah.
If you just tuned in recently, we're the hosts of the Stuff to Blow Your Mind podcast.
Yes.
a science podcast in the How Stuff Works family. This is not the Stuff to Blow Your Mind podcast right here. This is Trailer Talk, where we come on Facebook Live and talk about movies related to our recent episodes. Last week we had an episode about artificial gravity, so we're talking about artificial gravity scenes in movies. And we've just talked about, 2001: A Space Odyssey, the year 2000 Mars movies.
We talked about Conquest of Space.
Moonraker.
And Moonraker.
Conquest of Space.
So we got
now
one
more.
left?
Oh, also, if you want to leave a comment, do it.
And we got this. Has anybody out there
Nope.
seen
Okay.
whatever Sharknado this is, where they're in space? Sharknado 5? 4?
4 is always always a good part, a good phase in your franchise to go to space. 'Cause I think that's when
Yeah.
Hellraiser went to space, right?
Leprechaun,
That's
I
right.
also
Yeah. Leprechaun?
think went to space somewhere around there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, this makes me wonder if you could create centrifugal artificial gravity inside a shark if you spun the shark around fast enough.
If it were a big enough shark, right?
Yeah, you'd
a
have,
massive
or a
enough shark.
tiny person. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
Like-
always worth remembering. If you had a shark the size of the Earth, it
Right.
would generate gravity.
Yeah.
You would be able to live on it. It would-
very Pinocchio. Yeah.
I've had
All right.
many dreams along those lines.
Okay, we are about to go.
Yeah, I think
with
let's go ahead and hit our last
one
entry
more.
here.
Okay.
Now this is a film that I don't think anybody loves right now, but I predict
I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I did not love it, but I predict in the future this will be kind of a cult favorite. I think this one will gather a following.
You know, we actually had a listener write into us just last week about Neil Blomkamp's whole new series of sci-fi shorts that are
Yeah.
on Oats Studios. And
I keep meaning to watch them.
Me too, yeah. But this is his last. Well, actually, Chappie was his last film. This was his film before that, Elysium.
Yeah, this is Neil Blomkamp film, and it is it's problematic because
I
it's,
liked it, but it is a little heavy-handed with its political message.
Yeah, it's very heavy-handed.
Yeah.
with its political
Simplistic
commentary.
and...
Yeah, everybody's either just a complete animal or a cold, hearted villain, or they're a working man hero. It's just very black and white. That being said, it's tremendously fun. It has a lot of wonderful action sequences. The gadgets are tremendous, the weapons. And here we see footage of a fabulous orbital space station.
This is where the artificial gravity comes into play.
Now, I think one thing that's demonstrated in this movie, unlike all the others we've been talking about, is this rotating space station is actually huge, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
this would be the kind of structure that could, in reality, if it were structurally sound, generate Earth-like gravity inside through rotation, right?
Right.
Because it would be big enough that it wouldn't have to rotate so fast. You'd have to deal with disorienting Coriolis forces and stuff like that. You could just live in it, and it would be a lot like Earth.
Yeah, the premise of the movie is essentially it's Metropolis, but adding space to it. So the space station is where all the upper class, wealthy people live. They've got all the amenities they could possibly need, including this like super duper healthcare. What would you call it? Like a pod?
Yeah, they have like a
climate?
Medipod.
Yeah.
A Medibot.
And all the lower classes who don't get access to any of those amenities live on Earth, and Earth is just like this dystopian hellhole.
Right. Yeah, it's your classic ivory tower kind of scenario. And it for all its simplicity, you do have, like I say, some fun action sequences. You have
Charlton Copley's so good in this.
Oh yeah, he plays this just real animal of a character. At one point, he just gets shot all to hell, and then they throw him in one of these med bays, and it stitches him all up, and then he's back out
There
snarling
he is.
and
He
firing
was just there
weapons
for
at
a second.
everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like essentially homeless. He's a homeless animal with an exoskeleton and amazing video game
And like
weapons.
a laser katana or something.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Oh, I think I just saw him.
Yeah, he's fun.
Do we have a comment coming in? Anthony says, snooty people have all the medicine. Yeah,
Yeah.
does seem to be the case.
Well, I mean, it is a common subject in a lot of science fiction. We're talking, we're looking at, like, as we talk about scientific advances in medicine and technology and travel, who are they for?
Also,
who is transhumanism for?
Yeah, and a very controversial topic in present-day America right now, as we're seeing in our news headlines. Yeah, so there you go. Like, Elysium becomes, like, even more relevant in 2017 than it was, when was it, 2012 or something like that when it came out? But still a little heavy-handed.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But yeah, exoskeletons, med bays, some nice futurism. This is one that's fun to have on in the background, or to, if you go into this with the right expectations, I feel like it's a fun flick. And I can only think that that as the years pass by, people are going to come back and they're going to keep rediscovering Elysium and reveling in its doing double takes like a pigeon.
One thing we could say is that a lot of sci-fi classics from older eras are incredibly simplistic in their moral attitudes, and we still think of them as classics. I mean, if you think about, you mentioned that this is a lot like Metropolis,
right?
I mean, Metropolis is in the moral development of its characters, it's basically a fairy tale.
Yeah.
It doesn't have like a whole lot of shades of nuance and ambiguity. There are just like these evil rich people who are oppressing the workers and then the people who are trying to help them.
I just watched like a more nuanced version of that same trope over the weekend, that Ben Wheatley adaptation of J.G. Ballard's High Rise, and it's got Tom Hiddleston in it. It's pretty well done. It is, I think, something that if it came out like 20 years ago, we would consider it like a Kubrick type masterpiece. But like nowadays, it feels like it hits a little too close to home, Yeah. But I liked it and I recommend it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have any other comments?
There are a ton of other movies that we considered for this episode that do a really good job of honoring gravity, such as Interstellar.
Interstellar does a great job
of
treating the science with respect. Like it actually tries to be plausible. I give it a pretty solid thumbs up, and it has a rotating centrifugal space station.
But it's not at all silly. So what can you say about Interstellar? It's like, yes, Nolan, you were joyless once more. Thank you for giving us something.
There's
to
a
watch.
kind of silly fight scene in it.
We got one more comment before we wrap up.
Anthony, who has had all the comments.
Yeah.
Has a good one.
This is really just us having a one-way conversation with Anthony. Yeah.
Anthony, good job.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony.
He says the space station in Elysium uses space missiles to kill illegal immigrants.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that part. Yeah.
Would there be any gravity issues with using this weaponry in space?
Let's repeat that for the audience.
That's a good point. So he says, I haven't seen the movie, but he says that the Elysium space station, which is a big rotating torus, it fires off missiles to kill illegal immigrants.
Yeah. So essentially, like they'll get these like junky little ships. They'll fly up to try to like get onto the space station, because I think it's like once you're on the space station, they can't kick you off or something like that, right?
But they can shoot a rocket at you.
Or they can have that like crazy bounty hunter with a katana kill you.
But this is a good point Anthony makes. Anthony says, so if you're firing off missiles, isn't that going to mess with your rotation? And I think it very well could.
Yeah,
like
that sounds right.
In space, anytime you shoot something in one direction, from Newton's laws, you have an equal and opposite reaction in the other direction. So if you're firing in any kind of vector that is along with or opposite your rotation speed, you'd be affecting the rotation speed of your space station. You need to compensate.
So really what they would want probably are like satellites around the space station that house their Star Wars weaponry that fires down rods or missiles or whatever at these smaller ships that are coming up from Earth.
That's how to defend your space station.
Yeah, if you're, planning to have this upper class exclusive only space station, I recommend getting some satellites filled with missiles.
Yeah, and we're not even getting into if you're going to have fighting on your space station. How does the Coriolis effect factor into your use of bow and arrows or whatever you're using?
That should be a thing. I don't know if there may be a movie that does this, but I don't know if I've seen it. So if you imagine a space station with a very small rotating drum for artificial gravity, these kind of things, we've talked about the problems with them. I mean, if it's small enough and rotating fast enough, it might make you sick just to turn your head.
Right.
Yeah.
And you have all kinds of crazy Coriolis forces that would make movement difficult to understand. So if you stage a fight scene in a 10-meter rotating drum for astronaut exercise, people will be all over the place.
Man,
I think somebody should do that.
Can't you imagine like a Jason Bourne-esque close combat situation, except both combatants
throw a punch and it's
they're throwing punches off to the side and vomiting every time they turn their head.
Well, this is where the transhumanity comes into play. We have to rebuild our bodies so we can fight better in space.
There you go.
Which is the origin of cyborgs.
And that seems to be how we continually advance our technologies. Is how are we going to fight with this? How are we going to fight better with this, etc.
All right, guys. I think that's a good point to wrap it up.
Thank
you for watching, Anthony.
And if you want more, again, you can find us at StuffToBlowYourMind.com. We are the Stuff to Blow Your Mind podcast, and you can get that podcast pretty much anywhere. Apple Podcasts, Google Play,
Spotify.
Yeah.
And really anywhere you download your podcasts. Like that RSS feed, it's going out to everywhere.
Yes.
If you find us there, hit subscribe so we'll keep coming at you in the future. And thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
He learned almost too late that man is a feeling creature. And because of it, the greatest in the universe. And he learned too late for himself that men have to find their own way to make their own mistakes. There can't be any gift of perfection from outside ourselves. And when men seek such perfection, they find only death, fire, loss, disillusionment, and the end of everything that's gone forward. Men have always sought an end to toil and misery. If it can't be given, it has to be achieved. There is hope, but it has to come from inside, from man himself.